Welcome to the 700 Club. You know, I want to comment on one thing before we start our other news. The president has said that the Floyd case indicated that we were now a nation of systemic racism. All right, I asked our staff if they would just get me the numbers of people who've been elected in our country who are African American. I'm going to start with, of course, we had a president who was an African American. We've had a vice president African American. We now have 57 African American representatives in Congress. We have 3 senators who are African Americans. There are 7 lieutenant governors, and we have 6 attorney generals elected in our states. We have 3 secretaries of state of the United States. And more than 1/3 of America's top 100 cities is governed by an African American. How in the world could anybody say there's systemic racism? And if you look at big money, who's got the big money? Well, Michael Jordan has got the big money. I mean, just for starters. And then you look at the highly paid athletes. I mean, and then you look at Motown and you look at the people who are getting all kinds of money. And to say that this is systemic racism is just an absolute lie. And I just think it's time we call out those Pinocchios, because they make them all the time and they don't get called on it. But to say we're a country of systemic racism, and then you go back to that 1619 nonsense that was put out by the New York Times, that America did not start, the United States did not start until we imported the first African slaves. That is just nonsense. It's not true. And yet, as somebody said, we know it's not true, but it makes a good headline. I mean, we are not a racist country. We're a country of immigrants. We're a country of opportunity. And America is the greatest nation on the face of the earth. And yet there are people who delight to destroy it. Now, I might add, I've been telling you on this program, the Democrat agenda to take over our country. The Democrat capital of the United States. Is that where Washington, D.C. is headed? It is if the Democrats get their way. Today, the House votes on what's called D.C. statehood. So what can Republicans do to block this power grab? And why does so much hinge on the Senate filibuster? Janet Browder explains.
Making Washington, D.C. the nation's 51st state is a top legislative priority for Democrats. H.R. 1 is expected to pass the House, but getting it by the Senate could prove much tougher.
We're Americans. If we fulfill all obligations of citizenship, we should be treated equally, and that's what statehood does.
This coming from one lifelong D.C. resident, and Democrats agree, including the White House. This week throwing its full support behind H.R. 51. In a statement from the Office of Management and Budget, Congress should provide for a swift and orderly transition to statehood. The same bill passed the House last year, but fell flat in the Republican-controlled Senate. Even with Democrats now in charge, the same thing will likely happen because of the 60-vote filibuster.
And so I think you're going to hear a lot of talk within the next several weeks about whether or not the Democratic members have the votes to pass this bill, and if they can get to 50 votes, whether they will be willing or able to abolish or alter the filibuster in order to pass this legislation.
Zach Smith with the Heritage Foundation testified in last month's hearing. He tells CBN News there's a constitutional reason the nation's capital is not a state.
The framers envisioned that the seat of the federal government would be independent from any state. And there were really 2 reasons behind that. They wanted to ensure that the federal government could have physical control over the Capitol sufficiently to secure the officials who work there, the buildings that are there that house government operations. And they also wanted to make sure that no one state had an outsized influence on the operations of the federal government.
Republicans see the effort as a power grab. House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy.
It's unconstitutional. It's no different than packing the Supreme Court. The only reason the Democrats are doing it is trying to get more electoral votes and more senators. And why they're doing it when they are, because they know they're going to lose the majority. It was never created or should be a state. If there's anything it should do, it should go back to Maryland.
Since D.C. consistently supports the Democratic nominee for president, statehood would tilt the balance of power in the Senate to Democrats. So much hinges on the Senate filibuster for this bill and others. Right now, though, not enough senators support getting rid of it. So 60 votes it is. In Washington, Jenna Browder, CBN News.
You have to go back to history and realize that Hamilton and Jefferson were talking together, and the thought was the capital should be in Philadelphia. And yet the southern states said that's too far away for us. And the northern states said we don't want to go down into Georgia or Alabama or North Carolina. And so they had a compromise between Alexander Hamilton and Thomas Jefferson on where to put it. And it was called the District of Columbia, and Washington was going to be a city as the capital of our nation in the district, but it was never intended to be a state. And this is a clear power grab by the Democrats to overturn the history and the Constitution of the United States. Well, CBN chief political analyst David Brody is here to talk about the Democrat agenda. David? D.C. statehood is just one part of a massive power grab by Democrats. They want to get rid of the Senate filibuster, pack the Supreme Court, federalize elections. What are the chances that they'll make this happen?
Well, let's start with this, Pat. It's all about the Senate filibuster. You mentioned the Senate filibuster. Look, if Democrats can change the filibuster rule, the legislative filibuster rule, then everything else we're talking about, D.C. statehood, this federal elections, H.R. 1 we've heard so much about, the Equality Act, gun control, packing the Supreme Court, all of it becomes reality. But they've got to change the legislative filibuster first, because that takes the threshold down from 60 votes to only 50 votes. And that's what Democrats want to do. And let's be clear, Pat, that is exactly what Democrats want to do. The only thing stopping them are two people, really one. Senator Joe Manchin from West Virginia. He's the one to watch. He's the only one to watch. Maybe Kyrsten Sinema from Arizona. Those are the two that have had issues with the filibuster. But I can tell you from some of my sources on Capitol Hill, they are indeed being pushed by Democrats. There is a full-on campaign to get Manchin and Sinema to change their view on the legislative filibuster, saying now is the time to get all of this done. And the question is, why is now is the time? Well, there's a lot of reasons for it. But let's be honest, Kevin McCarthy, in that interview that you saw with Jenna that was in her piece, I did talk to Kevin McCarthy yesterday, and he believes on a scale of 1 to 10 that Republicans will take back the House in 2022. So Democrats know that they got to get it done now or they're going to be in big trouble.
Is there a chance, you know, it looks like the people are really disgusted with Washington. Are there some vulnerable senators so that not only will the House switch, but maybe the Senate may switch?
Yeah, well, for sure. As a matter of fact, the political prognosticators, people that do this for a living, not just the pollsters, forget the pollsters. I think we're all done with the pollsters, Pat. But people that actually track these races down on the ground say that the Senate clearly is up for grabs, just like the House. And so everything's up for grabs in 2022. And I think Democrats, the reason you're seeing so much of this liberal push by Biden and the progressives is not just because of 2022, but, you know, they remember that they're going to go back to Merrick Garland. Remember, Merrick Garland wasn't brought up as a Supreme Court nominee. Then Amy Coney Barrett was rushed, according to the Democrats, in just a few weeks or 3 or 4 weeks. So they're frustrated. They're angry at Republicans. They're angry at Mitch McConnell for holding up legislation when Republicans control the Senate and they control the House. And this is payback. The problem with payback is payback begats payback, and we go down a very, very dangerous road in America if it happens.
Well, the last question, how does all this square with the president's pledge to seek unity?
Yeah, well, listen, I'm not a Washington Post fact checker, but if I was, I'd give it 4 Pinocchios. I mean, are you kidding me? What unity exactly? There's been no unity. They did budget reconciliation on the $1 trillion stimulus bill. They're about to do budget reconciliation on the Jobs Act coming up. Kevin McCarthy, like I said, I spoke to him. I want to play a quick little soundbite of Kevin McCarthy saying that he hasn't even talked to Joe Biden yet. Have a look, Pat.
I've never spoken to President Biden since he's become president. So I I could not judge, not one time. Nor has he called me, nor have I spoken to him. Now, I request meetings to talk about the border more than a month ago and the crisis that he created. But unfortunately, when the president talks about bipartisanship, that isn't what he means.
Pat, on unity, it's all been words, no action whatsoever from Biden.
Thank you, David. Appreciate it. Well, in other news, banning chokeholds and no-knock warrants. These are just two items in a bill on police reform. Plus, what action is the DOJ taking with the Minneapolis police? John Jessup has more on that story.
Thanks, Pat. Police reform is gaining momentum after the Derek Chauvin verdict over the death of George Floyd. Attorney General Merrick Garland announced a federal probe into the Minneapolis Police Department, seeking to learn if officers regularly breach civil rights through excessive force or discriminatory methods. In the Senate, South Carolina's Tim Scott plans to bring back his 2020 police reform bill, which bans chokeholds and no-knock warrants, as well as make it easier to pursue criminal charges against police officers. Scott says he believes he can reach a compromise with Democrats over issues that scuttled the bill last year. Well, turning overseas, Russian President Vladimir Putin is telling foreign powers Moscow won't tolerate any interference in its sphere of influence. In his annual State of the Nation address, Putin warned against crossing, quote, red lines, promising Russia will respond harshly, quickly, and asymmetrically to any provocation. He also trumpeted the nation's increasing investment in hypersonic weapons and ballistic missiles. This as Russia menaces neighboring Ukraine, moving an estimated 150,000 troops to the border and increasing naval activity in the Black Sea. Wednesday, the State Department called on Moscow to draw down its massive military force encroaching Ukraine. Well, for millions of people around the globe, freedom to openly practice their faith is a dream. The U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom monitors the world to shine the light on the issue, and it's just released a complete picture of places considered the worst offenders. CBN's Jennifer Wishon has the details.
Christians are being persecuted around the world at a pace not seen since the 1st century. This as China terrorizes millions of Muslims while conducting business as usual with the world.
For a very small budget every year, the United States government drops this bomb in the human rights community that reverberates on every corner of the globe.
A bombshell annual report on the state of religious freedom around the world by the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom. A grim tale of staggering proportions. 50,000 Christians held in North Korean prison camps, some 3,000 Yazidi girls and women missing in Iraq, 130,000 Muslims in internment camps in Burma, as many as 3 million Uyghur Muslims in Chinese concentration camps.
In our first report, we raised concern 22 years ago about what the Chinese Communist Party was already then doing to the Uyghur community.
But the world didn't pay attention. Now the communist regime works to reprogram an entire community while subjecting some to barbaric procedures like organ harvesting.
They even marketing the Uyghur organs in the countries, Muslim majority countries. They find two particular religions, Islam and Christianity, problematic for the survival and existence of the Communist Party.
The report identifies countries of particular concern, the worst offenders. 10 are already designated as such by the State Department. Commissioners recommend India, Russia, Syria, and Vietnam also be added to the list. U.S. ally Turkey is listed as a Tier 2 offender.
We're not letting them sleep one night without us screaming at the top of our lungs in a bipartisan way, Republican and Democrat, to make sure they can do what they choose to do, but they're not going to do it in the shadows.
The commission points out the pandemic added to the burden, as many religious minorities were blamed for the outbreak.
It's time for Christians to do what the Apostle Paul called them to do, which is to pray for those who are in prison as if they were there with them.
Commissioners encourage the Biden administration to fill a number of vacant positions dedicated to putting pressure on countries that persecute their people. Jennifer Wishon, CBN News.
Shining the light on an incredibly important issue. Thanks, Jennifer. Pat, back to you.
we've been talking about this for some time, but it's gotten worse. China, in my opinion, has turned 180 degrees. I mean, they have completely reversed what was there before. I was pointing to China as the next great Christian country with more Christians than any other nation on the face of the earth. And now with Xi, it's been a repression. Churches are being torn down. People are being forbidden to build churches. They're being harassed when they are worshiping. They're being prescribed for anti-government statements, and they're being monitored night and day. It is just a nightmare. North Korea has already been like a gulag. You know, the Pyongyang is one of the most, if not the most repressive in terms of what it does to its minorities. And something's got to be done, but who's going to do it? It's going to be the Lord. I know we have not the power here in this country to do it. But somebody, you know, we've got to ask the Lord. But we have brothers and sisters who are Christians. And then you've got the poor Yazidis, and then you've got others that the Turks are going after, the Kurds and so forth. I mean, there's always an attempt. The Turks did to the Armenians something that was just horrible. It was genocide, and they will not, they don't even want us to mention the fact that it was genocide, but it was genocide against the Christians in their country. And, you know, one of these days, Erdogan's, who is now more and more dictatorial and more a strong Muslim. It used to be that Turkey was, you know, well, Ataturk was he wanted freedom. He wanted a secular country, but Erdogan says, no, we're an Islamic state, and we're going to do everything we can to emphasize that fact. And that means they're going to be on the list. If not already, they should be. The American people do not trust the media. They do not trust them. What do they say? Certainly the Trump supporters and most Republicans say the media has become the megaphones from the far left. And that's how current news and social media have been described. But could that be changing? Will conservatives be launching their own space on social media? David Brody brings us this look at the emerging media landscape.
We may no longer see Donald Trump in front of cameras or feel the impact of his late-night tweets, but his infamous label fake news lives on as much as ever before.
This is a news media that will look you in the face and say that they are a news media. They're nothing of the sort any longer. They are unquestionably the megaphones for the far left in America today.
When Trump departed, he left a gift of inflated exposure and better ratings to a number of conservative media outlets, including Newsmax and One America News. Meanwhile, Fox News only got lumps of coal from the outgoing president.
Fox has become fake news, too. I don't know what happened.
While Fox remains the major conservative voice, things have changed since the events of January 6th, especially when it comes to staying away from so-called flamethrowers like U.S. Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene. What's been your experience there? I look for you there. I don't see you there often, if at all. I don't know. I don't track it totally. But what's your experience there with Fox?
Well, if you notice, David, I'm one of the most conservative members of Congress, and I'm never invited to be on Fox News. Mm-hmm. Everyone knows that Fox News changed drastically after the election. Republicans all over the country constantly talk about how Fox has changed, and they don't see it the same as they used to.
The Georgia Congresswoman seems to be part of a growing distrust of the media. Recent polls shows that of those who voted for President Trump, 92% of them see the media today as just a part of the Democratic Party. Another poll shows since January 6th, that feeling among Republicans has increased even more, up some 7%. Washington Post media reporter Paul Farhi says the Trump faithful have totally tuned out the mainstream media over issues such as coverage of election integrity issues during the 2020 election. And even his answer is somewhat telling.
In some ways, David, it's hard to argue with
the faithful and the belief of the faithful, the facts don't seem to really matter, and the evidence doesn't seem to matter.
So where do Trump conservatives go? Some are looking to alternative outlets, which have refused to back away from charges about a rigged election. At first, social media served as a way to get around the mainstream influence, although with Twitter and Facebook leading the censorship charge, it's becoming trickier, and options to fully speak out have become limited.
Obviously, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, there are a lot of social media outlets that have proven to suppress the voices of conservatives. And so I think that we have all felt like, gosh, wouldn't it be nice if there was a platform available that would allow us to say what we want? Oh my gosh, the First Amendment, imagine that, our freedom of speech not being stifled.
That could change very soon as the former president, among others, prepared to take on social media by launching his own version.
He wants a space where everyone can feel welcomed, where people don't feel like, the fact checkers are going to be all over them, even though these things are factual oftentimes that the fact checkers get on. So I think it'll be really exciting to see sort of this next phase for my father-in-law.
This next phase will be fought primarily online as a battle against big tech censorship.
There's a lot of fear out there if we can't talk to each other and we can't express our opinions. How are we ever going to mount a great challenge for the midterms or to take back the White House? It's a very helpless feeling.
Tommy Lahren and other conservatives say the key will be multitasking, staying engaged on Twitter and other platforms, despite big tech's roving eye, while also looking for new viable conservative alternatives in this new media landscape.
A lot of folks I know are boycotting Twitter. They don't want to be on it, and it's understandable. But for me, I'm not going to give up an inch of a place that I still have a voice. So I'm going to keep talking for as long as I can until they deplatform me. The same thing goes with Facebook and Instagram. So unfortunately, it's kind of the best option we have right now is to just keep it up for as long as we can until we no longer have a voice on those platforms. And then we're going to have to get creative.
It's the reality millions of conservatives and voters live in today. David Brody, CBN News, Washington.
Well, David was reporting for CBN News, and I might say that we're gaining quite an audience because our news is factual and honest, and it's something you can trust because we try to tell the truth unvarnished and unafraid. So you can set your dial on CBN News, and our staff, I must say, is some of the best reporting that there is. They're just tremendous. And my hat's off to our team in Washington and other parts of the country that are covering these news events for you. But we've got to grow a lot more. It's just smaller considering the monstrous power of the regular network, the so-called mainstream media. But they've had a monopoly on news, and now that monopoly is breaking up very quickly. Terry?
Move over, Tom Brady. Jessica Long was the real star of the Super Bowl. A Toyota commercial about her life aired during the big game and quickly went viral. Over the course of 60 seconds, it told Jessica's inspiring story, beginning in a Russian orphanage and ending with Olympic glory. CBN's Will Dawson has more.
Jessica Long at this point really has her work cut out for her. She's only been swimming for 2 years.
I see the world record holder and I realize I'm gaining on her with each stroke. And there was at one point, we were 15 meters out of the wall, and I just said to myself, I did not come here to get second.
Jessica Long putting in some huge strokes towards the finish.
And we touched the wall so close, you had to look up at the scoreboard.
Jessica Long is going to have to extend for the wall. She does it, a Paralympic Games record.
But in that moment, I knew that I had won.
In 2004, at the age of 12, Jessica Long became the youngest Paralympian to win a gold medal. In fact, that year, she won 3.
There was 20-some thousand people who had just watched that race. So I was just trying to catch my breath, excited that my family saw it, and just that I couldn't wait to see them.
Jessica was born in Russia without her lower leg bones. It was there in a Siberian orphanage she was adopted by Steve and Beth Long, a couple from Baltimore, Maryland.
They saw a picture of me and another little boy, and I think it's so special and so incredible because they really felt on their hearts that we were the children that God wanted them to adopt.
At 18 months, the Longs made the difficult decision to amputate Jessica's lower legs, the first of 25 painful surgeries.
You didn't have to tell a girl with no legs that I knew I was different. I was missing half of my body. But I really had incredible parents who really taught me that, God has always had a plan for me.
That plan made sense in the water.
Every Sunday after church, we would go over to my grandparents' house and spend time with them. And they had a pool in their backyard, and I would eat as fast as I could just so I could be the first one in the pool. And then I would be the last one out.
At the age of 10, Jessica joined the local swim team. And while the pool made sense, she questioned why God made her different.
I remember being really angry. I remember not wanting anything to do with God. And I was going in for surgeries every 3 months. And all I ever heard was God made me this way. And I was like, I don't think I like that.
That anger fueled her competitive drive. In 2006 at the World Championships in South Africa, 14-year-old Jessica won 9 gold medals, beat out fellow swimmer Michael Phelps for an ESPY award, and received worldwide recognition.
I think swimming really just became my identity because going into the 2008 Paralympics, I didn't perform as well as I would have liked to. I was the world record holder in the 100 breaststroke, but I got the bronze medal. And one of the first things that I asked my parents, do you guys still love me? And they're like, what are you talking about?
Her surface relationship with God gave way to her identity as a swimmer.
I think in a way I felt like I could do it all on my own, and I totally could, right? I was the one going through surgeries. I was the one walking in 2 prosthetic legs, and I was my legs hurt me every single day. And I didn't even want to rely on my parents, let alone someone that I couldn't even see. I was winning awards. I was on red carpets in LA. I was, getting sponsorships.
Over the next 6 years, Jessica racked up over 50 gold medals and 18 world records. At the London Paralympic Games in 2012, Jessica realized something was missing.
I just won 5 gold. Life was great. I'd had a commercial with Coca-Cola. There were so many things, again, that were happening. But still, I just remembered feeling really empty and just really unsatisfied, which I was like, why? I've done everything that I've ever wanted to in the swimming journey, the swimming career. How do I still feel empty? How do I still feel unsatisfied?
While training for London, Jessica attended a women's Bible study. And over time, she knew she needed something to change.
I think I was just tired of being angry. I think I was tired of carrying all this weight. I think, nothing was still satisfying my soul. And that's all I'd ever heard my whole life, right? Is God is the one. He's the one that can fulfill and satisfy all of your needs.
One night in the summer of 2013, she surrendered her life to God.
And I walked up and prayed with a woman that I had known and just was like, I really want to give him my whole heart. I want to pray. I don't want to question anymore. And it was a really special moment. I really do know for a fact, I gave him all of me. And I just remember feeling so weightless and so just a part of God's family for the first time, really a part of it. I feel so much gratitude and love towards just everything that God's given me, just so thankful.
Today, Jessica is married and training for this year's Paralympic Games in Tokyo. She even starred in a Toyota Super Bowl commercial. As one of the most decorated Paralympic athletes of all time, Jessica is confident in her ability, but even more secure in her identity.
My identity is in Christ, and I really hope that I show that with just my character, the way that I do things on the pool deck. And I know I couldn't do it without God, so I do really rely on him. And when I'm swimming, I do picture him next to me, and that I'm still using the talent that he has given me. And I think that I'm still really living my purpose, and that he's really proud of me. And I would say every athlete or anyone has probably ever felt this, just not satisfied, right? It's not working. You're not satisfied. It's never going to be enough. But God is enough, and that's really hard, and it's all on your own time, of course. But just know that God's waiting for you with his arms open, and he can't wait to have you a part of his family.
Remarkable accomplishments. Someone driven to do her best, to be her best. Someone who accomplished all of that, and yet someone who resented the way she'd been born and created. Anger. We have a lot of anger in our culture today, don't we? People who are unhappy with the way things are around them, with how they're treated, with themselves in many instances. You know, Jesus came that we might have life and have it abundantly. And I know you hear that over and over again, but this is what I want you to hear in Jessica's story. You can't have that if you're going to harbor bitterness and resentment and anger. What's the key to coming out of that? It's doing a 180 and facing God directly and saying, God, you don't make mistakes. You created me with intention and purpose, and I want to serve you. Do what Jessica did. Give him your life. You know, if you focus on all the things that have been done to you that are wrong, that you haven't been able to do, you'll stay angry your whole life, but you'll never find peace and contentment. And yet, that's what you were created for. So I think we have to ask ourselves, which door are we going through? We get to pick door 1 or door 2. But you only get those 2 doors. It's him or it's your angst. Choose him. You know, he's waiting so carefully, so lovingly, so grace-filled, so merciful. He understands what you're feeling. But he's saying, trust me. You know, when we give him who we are and all we have, he takes even the things that are challenges and he does something amazing with them. So the question is, are you willing to let go of your right to be angry? Your right to be dissatisfied, your right to be discontent, and trust him for something bigger and better than that? And I'm not talking about Olympic gold. I'm talking about that peace that happens inside of you that lets you wake up filled with joy and gratitude for another day. If you don't have that and you'd like it, pray with me now. Just be willing to do what she did. It's surrender. I surrender all. I surrender all. Let's pray. Father, I'm coming to you after battling you in many ways, resenting you in many ways, frustrated with you in many ways, angry with my circumstances. But I recognize that I have kept myself there far too long. I want to know you, the one who created me. I want to know the why behind that. What is it you have for me? What is it you want me to do? How is it you want me to live? I confess to you my self-focus. I confess to you my determination to do everything myself. Today, I'm laying that all on the altar before you, Jesus. You paid a great price for me. And I've never been willing to accept it, but today I am saying, you died for me. I am a sinner in need of a Savior. Thank you, Jesus. Please forgive my sins. You know them all. I'm confessing them all to you today. And I am asking you for a new beginning. I'm asking you for a fresh way of thinking. I'm asking for you to take the old and replace it with the new. I'm asking for you to do heart surgery on me. I'm asking for you to change the way I think, the way I see things. Oh God, take all that I am and give me all that you are. Change my life. Change my life. Fill me with your Holy Spirit and teach me how to live for you. I want to be a disciple of you, Jesus. I want to be one who learns about you, knows you, walks with you, receives from you everything you intended. Let today be the beginning of that. In your precious name, I pray. Amen. How does one become a disciple? someone who follows after, someone who wants to be like the person they're following. Well, we've put a packet together for you. It's called A New Day, and it's filled with wonderful information on how do you follow Jesus? What do you do now you've committed your life? This is free. So is the phone call to get it. There's the number, 1-800-700-7000. Just call and say, I want the New Day packet. We will get it out to you right away. Pat?
Thank you. I want to point out this is not a weather show, but it has been cold on the East Coast. The temperature in our area has dropped 40 degrees since yesterday. 40 degrees. So there's a cold front coming across the East Coast. And if you live in the East Coast, baby, it's cold out there. All right.
Welcome back to Washington for the CBN News Break. A spring snowstorm bringing sleet and freezing rain to the Midwest and heading east is creating dangerous conditions on the roads. Dash cam footage shows a pileup in Wisconsin. A semi-truck swerves, causing cars to crash and tipping over a snowplow. One person died in the wreck. Tennessee, Ohio, and Missouri expecting the wintry mix today. Meanwhile, a possibility of a severe thunderstorm and tornadoes are out in the Northeast. Well, Kirk Cameron's American Campfire Revival is nearing its end. Millions have joined Cameron during his 100-day spiritual campaign, where he incorporates worship and prayer with biblical discussions about truth. As his campaign closes, Cameron talked about having a unique faith in God through scripture and prayer, which can transform our hearts, home, and even the government. Well, you can always get the latest from CBN News by going to our website at cbnnews.com.
Janet Ward Black didn't lose her mind, but her employees thought she had. Janet's law firm was barely making enough to cover its bills. Then Janet had a radical idea. For every dollar the business brings in, Janet said, we're going to give away a dime, 10%. So what happened when the firm gave it a try? Well, you'll be blessed by this answer.
Janet Ward Black owns a law firm in Greensboro, North Carolina. Her team specializes in civil litigation, helping clients navigate some of the most difficult times in their lives.
Justice is God's idea, so we help people seek justice when they're not able to do it for themselves.
Her firm has also been making a difference around the world through giving. Already a faithful tither, Janet Ward says the idea came to her after Christmas in 2012.
I felt like the Lord was telling us if we started tithing on the law firm's gross revenue, I would in fact be tithing for all of our 30 employees.
But at the time, the firm was only a few years old and barely breaking even.
It was mathematically impossible. So there were tremendous risks involved for our business to do this. So I knew that God would have to do it if that's what He wanted us to do.
The first person she told was her executive director, Rhonda Holloway.
And I said, you mean gross revenue as in before we do anything with a dollar, we're going to give away a dime? She said, that's exactly what I mean. So I was, stoic as I could be and nodded my head. I went home that night and I told my husband, Janet Ward has lost her mind. All the things run through your mind. How am I going to explain this to the employees? How are we going to do that?
But Rhonda, who's also a Christian, was willing to give it a try.
I honestly did not know where the money was going to come from, but I was committed to doing it. That we would do something.
So they formed a committee that would decide where that 10% would go.
We looked to Matthew 25 about hungry, thirsty, jailed, strangers, naked, sick. And we said, why don't we use those as parameters?
As the firm's office manager and bookkeeper, Wendy Campbell says she knew it would be tough to give away 10% of their revenue and still meet all of their overhead and payroll.
Seeing the numbers and the balance statements and the income statements, I didn't think it was a bad idea, but I didn't necessarily know how we were going to pull it off.
But month after month, they did.
Pick it up with his... Around month 4, I realized no matter what we had in the bank account, enough was always there. We had not suffered at all, and we actually had reported a profit. every single one of those months. Cases were just kind of falling into our laps. Settlements that we weren't expecting to get, that were much larger than we were expecting to get. This was not our math, this was definitely God's math, because I was writing checks that I shouldn't have been able to write.
Not only did he allow us to tithe 10%, but he allowed us to give the biggest bonuses we've ever given in the history of the law firm.
It really made us feel like we were doing what we were supposed to do. And that's really kind of been the story the entire time since then.
This small North Carolina law firm has given to over 160 organizations and helps change the course of countless lives. Rhonda says her favorite part is delivering the news to those organizations selected to receive a donation.
Their reaction is just something that you don't get to see. How lucky am I to be a part of being able to do this?
We thought when we started this that we would be doing things for other people, but we're the ones that are blessed by it.
It just makes you feel like everything you've done, every prayer you've sent up, every case you've worked, every time you pull into the parking lot, it made a difference. It changed a life. That to me just speaks the love of Jesus.
It's been over 7 years since the fledgling firm took a step into the impossible, giving out of obedience and a heart to help others.
There's a verse that says, "Test me in this, I will protect your 90% if you give me 10%. Frankly, we'd much rather have God protecting our 90% than us trying to protect our 100%.
And we don't have to worry about next month, next year. We don't even really have to worry about tomorrow. We just have to take that step and trust that He's walking with us today.
What a wonderful testimony. The Bible says that one time we're not supposed to do this. It's testing God is sinful. Thou shalt not tempt the Lord thy God. But in the one area, God says, here, I want you to prove me. You can test me on this one with your tithes and offerings and see if I won't open the windows of heaven and pour you out such a blessing, you can't contain it. That's what God says. It'll be so much you can't keep track of all the money coming in. That's what the Lord promises. Now, it's a pretty significant thing, and here's a law firm that's put it into effect, and lo and behold, the miracles took place. I'm seeing it in my own life. I hope you see it in yours, because it will be there, but you've got to start. You don't say, all right, God, I believe you. Give me the money, and I'll give it to you. But no, you say, okay, what's in your hand? What did Moses have? He had a stick in his hand. Throw it down, and out of that stick, I'm going to transform Egypt. God can do it. I want you to join. If you're not giving, I'd like to have you become a member of the 700 Club here at CBN and Operation Blessing. We want to help the poor and the needy and the hungry, exactly what Janet Ward Black and her team are doing. We want to help those with Operation Blessing, and you can be a part. The 700 Club, it's an easy thing. It's $20 a month. That's all. 65 cents a day, and you can be part of an army of thousands. So I ask you, pick up the telephone, call in 1-800-700-7000, 700 Club. And when you do, I have something I want to give you that I hope will be a blessing when we receive your first contribution. I'm going to give you a copy of this book, I Have Walked with the Living God. And it is a book that can transform your life and talk about victory. And there are a whole bunch of pictures in here of the early days. And there it is, part of it. It's all there. Terry?
Well, this is Fred, who lives in Tacoma, Washington, Pat. He says, I Have Walked with the Living God was one of the most interesting and educational books I have ever read. You laid it all out there. I couldn't put it down. That's a great testimony, isn't it?
I did lay it out there. It's brutally honest, and I hope it'll be a blessing to people. But that comes along when you join the 700 Club when we receive your first contribution. All right, what's next?
Time for some of your email. And Pat, this first one comes from Tina, who says, I have a friend who was a single mother when she got married. Shortly after the marriage, her husband began being mean and controlling toward the children, at times refusing to have any interaction with them. She has discussed her concerns with her new husband, and nothing has changed. Is this grounds for divorce if the new husband has no positive interaction with her children?
You know, you asked for, there are legal grounds in the Bible, but this is your second marriage, and you didn't say how come you got the marriage from the first.
Well, it says she was a single mom, so I don't know that she was married before.
She just had a child. Well, the answer is, you know, in the legal law, they've got what they call fraud and the inducement. If there's an inducement to somebody to enter into a contract and you don't tell them all the facts, that's a fraud. So the fact that this new husband wasn't going to look after your kids, that's certainly a reason for a separation. I don't understand all the details. You ask legal ground. You know, that, according to the Bible, is not a legal ground, but I don't know what else to say except you did it, dear. I mean, sometimes we have to live with our mistakes, all right?
This is Diane, who says, I'm told to get over it at my 31-year-old daughter's surprise death because God knew how long she'd live. If the date is set when we will die, why pray for healing? My daughter was going to die anyway, right?
No, that she wasn't going to die anyway, right? Look, there are things that cause us to have death. I mean, there are all kinds of things we do to kill ourselves. I mean, if she's a smoker and she gets lung cancer, she'll die of lung cancer. But God didn't, you know, if she hadn't smoked, she would have lived longer. So we have to recognize that God takes into account all the things we do. Work out your own salvation with fear and trembling, for it's God that works in you. So God's at work, but the fact that he knows the end of it, of course you pray, because Jesus said about his coming, he said, pray that your flight be not in winter or on the Sabbath day. Right. So that seemed to indicate you could actually change the day of his second coming with your prayer, all right?
This is Laura, who says, in your book, I Have Walked with the Living God, you talk about the early days of the 700 Club when you devoted the entire broadcast time to praying for people and experienced astounding miracles as a result. I'm wondering why you discontinued that and whether you would consider doing it again.
Well, the answer is we don't have a network like we did then. We had a cable network, and you know, we had the last, after 10 o'clock at night, it was all our time. Now we're only on an hour a day in various stations, so we have to compress what we do. But in those days, it was open-ended. I mean, at 10 o'clock at night, we just start praying and keep on praying. I mean, if God was moving, we didn't sign off till 2 in the morning. We can't do that on somebody else's station. All right. Well, that's all. Thank you for those questions. We leave you today with this word from Luke. For where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. And tomorrow we've got a good friend, America's pastor, Max Lucado, joins with tips to help children survive the pandemic. You don't want to miss that. For Terry and all of us, thanks for being with us. This is Pat Robertson. May the Lord bless you. Bye-bye.